Welcome, AP Psychology students. This video is going to be over Module 73 in your text, Biomedical Therapies. Again, you see in the title there, biomedical, so bio meaning of the body. So biomedical is going to assume that the cause of mental illnesses are biological reasons. So these are going to be mostly, but not entirely, medicines that work to alter brain chemistry in some way. So let's go. Our objectives, we want to be able to identify and describe the drug therapy. So, we're going to talk about what are some of the, more, commonly used families of medicines and how we find out if they are if they're effective. And then we're going to look at some other ones, including electroconvulsive therapy and deep brain stimulation. And then also, so what are some of the ways that you can, take care of yourself with a healthy lifestyle? So if, medicines are not your thing, there might be some other ways to help people avoid things like depression and anxiety. So all of this whole field of using medicine to alter people's behavior and thoughts, it's called psychopharmacology, which is a mouthful, but if you break it down, psycho of the mind, and then pharmacology, using medicines to to alter chemistry and in this case behavior. So how do we determine if these drugs are effective other than just, watching the commercials and have people, frolic in the meadow and say, oh yeah, this is so great. So generally we're going to use double-blind procedure. We've talked about that during the research methods. So you're going to, have a control group that does not get the medicine or gets a placebo, and we're going to compare it to the group that gets the active drug and see how different the results are. And again, we often find that people that get the placebo often show improvement too. So how much additional improvement are these medicines showing? So that's the number one way, is through a clinical trial using a double-blind procedure. So getting into the specific medicines, there's so many of these drugs out there that, trying to memorize all the names, I don't know that that's really a great use of our time, but at least the families of the drugs. So the first one here, they're called Anti-Psychotic Drugs. So they're going to be used to treat psychotic episodes, and really the condition we talked about the most that has psychotic episodes is going to be schizophrenia, mainly those positive symptoms, remember, like things like hallucinations and delusions. So these drugs help with positive symptoms of schizophrenia quite well. You can see some of the names there. I'm not terribly worried about that. You do want to know how they act on the brain, and primarily this is through working as a dopamine antagonist. So a little bit of review here. Basically, that means these drugs get into the synapse and they block the dopamine from getting into the receptor sites, thus at least temporarily reducing dopamine in the brain. These drugs, while fairly effective for those with the positive symptoms of schizophrenia, do have a lot of side effects. They can cause sluggishness, they can cause weight gain. Here in bold you see it says Tardive Dyskinesia, which again is a mouthful, but really what it is kind of like Parkinson's-like tremors that are due to the medicine. So if you remember, schizophrenia is involved with too much dopamine. Parkinson's is when there's not enough dopamine. So if you're reducing the dopamine and it's a bit too much, you might start to have these tremors. To kind of flip this around, they've also found sometimes the medicines that they give people with Parkinson's, they boost dopamine. And while they're trying to find the right dosage, they'll sometimes find that those patients will have hallucinations, like someone with schizophrenia. They'll have they can have a psychotic episode. So you can see the importance of dopamine in both of those conditions. Anti-anxiety drugs, you can see some of the names here again. We're not too worried about that. There's a whole long list of these. What I do want you to know is that they depress the central nervous system. They're going to calm the central nervous system and reduce your sensitivity to stimuli. They also boost the neurotransmitter GABA. sometimes serotonin, but pretty much always GABA as well. And you can see here some of the potential side effects. They can be both physiologically and psychologically addictive. It's easy to form dependence on them. So one, physiologically, you can build up tolerance. So you need more and more of these drugs like a Xanax to get the same feeling that you did before, to have the same effectiveness. But they can also be psychologically addictive. You think back to negative reinforcement. So if anxiety is reduced and I feel better psychologically the next time that I feel anxious, I'm going to reach for that pill to reduce the anxiety. So they can be very habit forming. They're very dangerous to take with other drugs. So you do not want to take Xanax and drink alcohol. It's incredibly deadly to do that. But they do work for anxiety. They work pretty quickly too, which is nice. They can work in a matter of minutes, some of these drugs, but they're not really seen as a long-term solution. So yes, if you're having panic attacks, they can help you, but it's not something long-term that you want to take every single day, because they are so habit-forming. Antidepressant drugs, there's a lot of these out there. Primarily they're used for depression, but increasingly they're used for some other conditions. They can be used for anxiety disorders, especially generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder. They've even been shown to be effective for panic disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder. So they have a lot of uses. Most of these are going to be used to increase the level of serotonin in the brain. We talked about selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So you talked about reuptake earlier in this course, and how some of these drugs block that ability for the sending neuron to take back the extra neurotransmitter. So serotonin is the most common neurotransmitter that these work with, but they can also work with norepinephrine and even dopamine. So it kind of depends on the symptoms of the depression that the person is feeling as to what antidepressant the drug or the doctor might prescribe. They are thought also, if you think about, okay, why do they work? Boosting serotonin can help. It's thought too that taking these drugs might actually lead to what's called neurogenesis, the creation of new neurons. So they're still kind of working out exactly why these drugs work. As for side effects, there's a laundry list of potential side effects. Probably the most common is weight gain. We're not talking massive weight gain, but slight weight gain. Some people feel very blah and flat when they take them. Just other little stuff, dry mouth, just headaches occasionally. It's definitely not something that if you're taking it, you want to just stop taking immediately. You could feel pretty ill if you do that. They do take quite a while to build up in your system, so most of the time you won't feel the full effect of an antidepressant for 4 to 6 weeks. So it can take a while. And critics say that a lot of the benefit comes from the placebo effect. I've read that before. Speaking personally, I know a lot of people that these medicines have helped. So you can do your own research and draw your own conclusions. We talked about reuptake. And then we have mood stabilizers. These are going to be used primarily for bipolar disorder, like manic episodes. And so lithium is the most popular, but there are several out there that work to stabilize mood. One side effect of this, probably the most common, is weight gain. And this, you can actually have substantially more weight gain on these drugs. Not all the time, but it's fairly common. As for why it works, again, it could be due to neurogenesis. So it's activating these parts of the brain that previously had been dormant. Other biomedical therapies. So these primarily involve the use of electricity to kind of jumpstart the brain, so to speak. These kind of have like an archaic, people believe that these are terrible. It's like you're torturing people, and maybe in the past it was a bit like that. But in modern time, they still work. They're still used. This first one, ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, you would go in, they would put you under, they would hook these electrodes to you, and they would send electrical currents through your brain. The people would have a seizure for up to 2 minutes, but they found that sending the electrical current tends to activate areas of the brain that previously had been dormant, had been inactive. And again, also this idea of neurogenesis. It's kind of, think of it like a car that's the battery's dead, and the electrical current can kind of jumpstart it. Again, we're still kind of learning why exactly it works, but we know that sending those electrical currents does have a positive benefit. These next two are like more modern versions of ECT. They're a little bit less, they're not shocking the individuals, so to speak, but they are using an electrical current. Deep brain stimulation, they'll actually put like electrodes. They'll cut your skull open, put an electrode in, and so it's kind of like a pacemaker for your brain. These are going to be used overwhelmingly for severe depression. So like medicine resistant depression. So you're taking the medicine, it's not really working, so let's try this. Maybe and it can actually make your brain more receptive to the medication as well. So it's not the first thing they're going to try with you, but again, I've seen a lot of people be helped by by this kind of stuff. We've talked about psychosurgery, cutting out pieces of the brain, lobotomies. We talked about that earlier in the course. Those aren't really used anymore. But we talked about the ice pick into behind the eyelid and separating the frontal lobe from the limbic system. Kind of an archaic way of modifying behavior, not really used much in modern psychology, if at all, I don't think. This is just kind of an image of ECT, and then this is the Rtms, where they put like the electrical coil, and again, they send the electrical current. And just, this is pretty commonsensical stuff, but understand that, medicines can help people, but there are other things that help as well. They call this therapeutic lifestyle change. So just things like getting exercise, getting enough sleep. They've done clinical trials where people that exercise, 30 to 45 minutes a day aerobically show just almost about the same amount of improvement as those on an antidepressant for mild or moderate depression. Again, getting enough sleep. We've talked about light therapy, light exposure. Getting outside really does help you get the vitamin D, social connection, being around people. There are some supplements, anti-rumination, just really distracting yourself, finding ways to take your mind off of things. So the point is that, medicines can help, but there's other things you can do immediately in your life to help your mental state. So hopefully this brief overview of the biomedical therapies was helpful, and we'll see you in class. Thanks, guys.